The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Cairo International Airport as Dr. Maya Johnson checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Her flight back to Boston would begin boarding soon, and the weight of responsibility on her shoulders felt heavier than the specially designed luggage at her feet. After 6 weeks of painstaking work at an archaeological dig site in the Valley of the Kings, she was finally heading home with precious cargo. Maya took a deep breath and adjusted her glasses, trying to calm her nerves. This wasn't just any trip. The Egyptian government had granted her university rare permission to study several ancient pottery fragments dating back over 4,000 years. These weren't just old pieces of clay. They potentially held secrets about early farming techniques that could change how historians understood the development of ancient civilization. Final boarding call for Flight 237 to Boston. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Maya gathered her things and joined the line of passengers. As she waited, she noticed a few curious glances at the unusual shape of her carry-on luggage. It wasn't your typical suitcase, but rather a specialized container with custom padding and climate control features to protect the delicate artifacts inside. She'd spent hours with the museum staff ensuring everything was properly secured for the journey. "Passport and boarding pass, please," the gate agent said with a tired smile. Maya handed over her documents, her hand slightly trembling. Even though she had triple-checked all her paperwork, the government permits, the university authorization letters, the customs declarations, she couldn't shake the worry that something might go wrong. "Everything looks in order, Dr. Johnson. Have a pleasant flight," the agent said, handing back her passport. The relief was temporary. As she walked down the jetway, Maya mentally rehearsed what she would say if any questions arose during the flight. The university had prepared her for this moment, but the responsibility of transporting pieces of world heritage across international borders was overwhelming. Once aboard the plane, Maya found her seat in the middle section of economy class. She carefully placed her backpack under the seat in front of her, but hesitated when it came to her special luggage. The overhead compartments were filling up quickly, and the thought of the artifacts being jostled or crushed made her stomach tighten. "Need help with that?" A flight attendant with a name tag reading Diane approached. "Actually, I have some very fragile scientific samples in here," Maya explained, her voice soft but firm. "I'd really prefer to place it carefully myself, if that's okay." Diane nodded, though her eyes lingered on the unusual case. "Of course. Just make sure it's secure before takeoff." Maya thanked her and carefully positioned the case in the overhead bin, making sure nothing else would be placed on top of it. She took her seat and buckled her seatbelt, feeling some of the tension drain from her shoulders. Just 14 hours and she'd be back in her lab at the university. A businessman in a crisp suit settled into the seat next to Maya. He gave her a polite nod before turning his attention to his phone. The plane was nearly full now, the cabin buzzing with conversations and the sounds of luggage being stowed. About 20 minutes into boarding, Maya noticed a commotion a few rows ahead. A passenger was struggling to find space for his rolling suitcase. "All these bins are full," the man complained loudly to another flight attendant. "There's no room anywhere." The flight attendant, a younger man with a serious expression, scanned the overhead compartments. His eyes settled on Maya's section. "Sir, I think there might be space here," he said, moving toward Maya's row. Maya's heart rate quickened as the attendant opened the bin above her seat and began to rearrange items to make space. "Excuse me," Maya said, standing up quickly. "Please be careful with the black case there. It contains extremely fragile scientific specimens." The attendant paused, giving her a look that seemed both surprised and slightly suspicious. "Ma'am, I understand, but we need to accommodate all passengers' luggage." "I know, and I'm not asking for special treatment," Maya explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just need to make sure the case stays positioned exactly as it is. It has specialized padding aligned in a specific way." The businessman beside her glanced up from his phone, now curious about the exchange. A few other nearby passengers turned to watch as well. The flight attendant hesitated, then closed the bin without moving Maya's case. "I'll find another spot for this gentleman's bag," he said to Maya, his tone now notably cooler. Maya sat back down, aware that she had drawn unwanted attention to herself. She pulled out a scientific journal from her backpack, hoping to distract herself with reading, but found it hard to concentrate. She couldn't shake the feeling that the flight attendant had been bothered by her insistence. About 10 minutes later, Diane, the first flight attendant, walked by again, this time with a more senior-looking crew member. They both glanced at Maya as they passed, speaking in hushed tones. Maya pretended not to notice, but her stomach knotted with anxiety. The plane was now fully boarded, and the captain announced they were preparing for departure. The safety demonstration began, but Maya barely paid attention, her mind racing with worry. Had she been too protective of her case? Should she have explained more clearly? Or was she overreacting to a perfectly normal interaction? As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, Maya closed her eyes and took deep breaths. In a few hours, this would all be behind her. She'd be back in Boston, carefully unpacking the artifacts in her lab, ready to begin the analysis she'd been planning for months. The plane paused on the tarmac, waiting for clearance to take off. Maya checked her watch again. They should have been in the air by now. Looking around, she noticed several flight attendants gathered near the front of the cabin, occasionally glancing back in her direction. A knot formed in her throat. Something wasn't right. The plane's intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a slight delay in our departure. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We should be on our way shortly." The businessman next to Maya sighed and returned to scrolling through emails on his phone. Other passengers murmured with annoyance about the delay. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Maya's palms grew sweaty as she noticed Diane speaking into a phone near the cockpit door, her expression serious. Then the most unexpected thing happened. The aircraft door, which had been closed for takeoff, reopened. A uniformed airport security officer stepped into the cabin, followed by 2 local police officers. Maya's heart nearly stopped when she saw them scanning the rows of seats, clearly looking for someone. When their eyes landed on her, she knew with terrible certainty that they were there for her. The security officer spoke quietly to Diane, who nodded and then pointed directly at Maya. The 3 uniformed men began walking down the aisle toward her seat. "Dr. Maya Johnson?" the security officer asked when they reached her row. Maya nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. Every passenger nearby was now watching intently. She could feel their stares, hear their whispers. "We need you to come with us, please," the officer continued. "And bring your carry-on items." "Can I ask why?" Maya finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to inspect your luggage, ma'am. There's been a security concern." The businessman beside her shifted uncomfortably away, as if suddenly wary of sitting too close. Maya felt a flush of embarrassment and confusion. "Wash over her, of course," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt with trembling hands. "But I have all the proper documentation for everything I'm carrying. I'm an archaeologist with Boston University, transporting artifacts with full permission from the Egyptian government." The officer's expression remained impassive. "Please, gather your belongings and come with us, ma'am." Maya stood, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes following her every move. She carefully retrieved her special case from the overhead bin and collected her backpack. As she followed the officers down the aisle, she heard the whispers. "What do you think she's got in there? Must be something illegal." They wouldn't call the police for nothing. The walk of shame seemed endless. By the time she reached the aircraft door, Maya's face was burning with humiliation. She had done nothing wrong, had all the proper permits and followed every regulation. Yet here she was, being escorted off a plane by police as if she were a criminal. Just before stepping off the plane, she glanced back. Nearly every passenger was watching, some with phones raised, possibly recording the incident. In that moment, Maya realized this wasn't just about her anymore. This was becoming a spectacle, and she had no control over what would happen next. As she stepped back into the terminal, one thought kept circling in her mind. What would these officers say when they discovered what was really inside her luggage? The fluorescent lights of the airport security room buzzed overhead as Maya stood clutching her special case to her chest. The room was small and windowless, with nothing but a metal table, 4 chairs, and a security camera in the corner. The air felt stale and too warm. "Please have a seat, Dr. Johnson," said one of the officers, gesturing to a chair. Maya sat down, slowly, keeping her luggage close. The three men, the airport security officer and two police officers, remained standing, creating an intimidating wall of uniforms. "I'd like to understand what's happening," Maya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I've done nothing wrong." The security officer, whose name badge read Officer Chen, placed a folder on the table. "We received a report of suspicious behavior from the flight crew. They were concerned about your unusual luggage and your protective attitude toward it." Maya blinked in disbelief. "Protective? I simply asked them to be careful with it because it contains fragile archaeological artifacts." "And you became agitated when a flight attendant attempted to move it, Officer," Chen continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I wasn't agitated," Maya protested. "I was concerned. These artifacts are thousands of years old and incredibly delicate. I'm responsible for their safe transport." One of the police officers, an older man with salt and pepper hair, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're going to need to inspect the contents of your luggage." Maya took a deep breath. She had nothing to hide, but the thought of these officers handling the ancient pottery fragments made her nervous. One wrong move could damage artifacts that had survived for millennia. "I understand," she said, "but I need to inform you that these are archaeological specimens on loan from the Egyptian government. They're extremely fragile and valuable. I have all the necessary documentation." She reached for her backpack, but the younger police officer stepped forward quickly. "Please keep your hands where we can see them. We'll look through your bag." The casual suspicion in his voice stung. Maya placed her hands flat on the table and watched as the officer unzipped her backpack and began rummaging through it. "My documentation is in the front pocket," she said quietly. "The blue folder." The officer pulled out the folder and handed it to Officer Chen, who began flipping through the papers with a skeptical expression. "These appear to be official permits," he admitted after a moment. "But we still need to verify their authenticity and inspect the contents of your special case." Maya nodded. "I understand, but please let me handle the artifacts. They require special care." Officer Chen exchanged glances with his colleagues before nodding reluctantly. "You can open the case, but do it slowly and explain everything we're seeing." With careful movements, Maya placed the case flat on the table and entered the combination on the locks. She was acutely aware of the three men watching her every move, as if expecting her to pull out something dangerous or illegal. As she lifted the lid, she began to explain. "These are pottery fragments from the Middle Kingdom period of ancient Egypt, approximately 4,000 years old. They were excavated from a site near Luxor. Inside the case, nestled in custom-fitted foam padding, lay several pieces of ancient pottery. Each fragment was individually wrapped in acid-free tissue and secured in its own compartment. Some were no larger than a credit card, while others were about the size of a paperback book. Their surfaces were worn, the once bright paint faded to subtle earth tones. Officer Chen leaned closer, his expression shifting from suspicion to surprise. "These are just old pottery pieces?" "Not just any pottery," Maya explained, her professional passion momentarily overriding her anxiety. "These fragments contain inscriptions and images that may reveal new information about ancient Egyptian agricultural practices. They're priceless historical artifacts." The older police officer peered into the case. "And the Egyptian government just lets you take these out of the country?" "With extensive permits and strict conditions," Maya said, pointing to her documentation. "I'm borrowing them for specialized analysis at Boston University's archaeology lab. Everything must be returned within 8 weeks." The younger officer still looked skeptical. "And why couldn't this analysis be done in Egypt?" "Our lab has advanced imaging technology that isn't available at the Cairo Museum," Maya explained patiently. "My team is going to create 3D models of the fragments and use spectral analysis to reveal details that can't be seen with the naked eye." As the officers continued to inspect the case, Maya noticed their postures gradually relaxing. The initial tension in the room was beginning to dissipate as they realized she was exactly who she claimed to be, a professor doing her job. Officer. Chen spent several minutes cross-checking her permits against a database on his tablet. The police officers stepped back, their aggressive stance softening into something more like curiosity. Everything appears to be in order, Officer Chen finally announced. Your permits are legitimate and the contents match the description in your customs declaration. Relief washed over Maya. So I can return to my flight? The three men exchanged uncomfortable glances. I'm afraid your flight has already departed, Dr. Johnson, the older police officer said. This verification process took some time. Maya's heart sank. Missing her flight meant the artifacts would be out of their temperature-controlled environment. Longer than planned, it meant calling her department head and explaining the delay. It meant finding a hotel and rebooking her travel. There's another flight to Boston tomorrow morning, Officer Chen offered, perhaps sensing her distress. We can help you make arrangements, Maya nodded numbly, trying to process this new complication. May I ask something? What exactly made the flight crew suspicious enough to call security? The officers exchanged glances again, a silent communication passing between them. The report mentioned you were unusually protective of your luggage, the younger officer finally said. And that you became agitated when someone tried to move it. And that's enough to call the police? Maya asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. No one answered directly. Officer Chen cleared his throat. We take all security concerns seriously, Dr. Johnson. But Maya knew there was more to it than that. She had seen how passengers routinely fussed over their belongings, how business people clutched their laptops, how musicians guarded their instruments. Yet somehow her concern for irreplaceable artifacts had been interpreted as suspicious. Is there somewhere I can wait while you help me make new arrangements? Maya asked, suddenly exhausted. Of course. We'll escort you to the airline's customer service desk, Officer Chen said. They can assist with rebooking your flight. As they gathered her belongings, Maya carefully repacked her special case, securing each artifact in its proper place. When she finished, she noticed the older police officer watching her with what seemed like genuine interest. So these really are 4,000 years old? He asked, his voice softer than before. Maya nodded. Yes, they've survived all this time, through wars and climate changes and the rise and fall of civilizations, and now they're helping us understand how people lived thousands of years ago. The officer nodded thoughtfully. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. It was a small moment of connection, but it meant something to Maya after the humiliation she just experienced. As they walked through the terminal, Maya was painfully aware of the stares from other travelers. Being escorted by security was like wearing a sign that said, "Trouble." Some people quickly looked away when she met their eyes, while others stared openly, probably wondering what she had done wrong. At the customer service desk, a harried airline, representative looked up as they approached. Officer Chen explained the situation in hushed tones, and the representative's expression shifted from wary to apologetic. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, Dr. Johnson, she said. Let me see what we can do for you. As the representative began typing on her computer, Maya's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was her department head, Dr. Rivera. Excuse me, I need to take this, Maya said, stepping away from the desk. Maya, where are you? Dr. Rivera asked when she answered. I got a message that there was some kind of security issue with your flight. Maya took a deep breath and explained what had happened, how the flight crew had become suspicious, how she'd been escorted off the plane, and how her luggage had been inspected. This is outrageous, Dr. Rivera said, his voice tight with anger. You had all the proper documentation. There was no reason for this. I know, Maya said quietly, aware of the officers still standing nearby. But it's been resolved now. The artifacts are fine, and I'm being rebooked on tomorrow's flight. The university will file a formal complaint, Dr. Rivera insisted. This kind of treatment is unacceptable, and we'll cover any additional expenses, of course. Maya thanked him, promising to send updates once her new travel arrangements were confirmed. When she ended the call, she noticed a small crowd had gathered near the customer service desk. People were pointing and whispering, some holding up phones as if taking photos or videos. With a sinking feeling, Maya realized that her removal from the flight had likely been recorded by passengers. In the age of social media, incidents like this rarely remained private. The airline representative waved her back to the desk. "Dr. Johnson, we've booked you on tomorrow's 10 a.m. flight to Boston. The airline will provide accommodation for tonight and meal vouchers. Again, we sincerely apologize for the inconvenience." Maya accepted the new boarding pass and vouchers with a quiet, "Thank you." The representative seemed genuinely sorry, but it did little to ease the sting of what had happened. Officer Chen cleared his throat. "Dr. Johnson, you're free to go. Again, we apologize for the delay, but we have to follow up on all security reports." Maya nodded, too tired to argue further. "I understand you're doing your job, but I hope you'll consider how quickly situations like this can escalate and how humiliating they can be for the person involved." The officers had the decency to look uncomfortable. The older one nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her point. As they walked away, Maya was left alone at the customer service desk, surrounded by curious onlookers. She gathered her belongings and headed toward the airport hotel, keeping her head high despite the stares. In her hotel room, Maya carefully checked each artifact to ensure they hadn't been damaged. During the inspection, to her relief, everything was intact. She then set up the portable humidity monitor she'd brought along and adjusted the room's air conditioning to create the best possible environment for the ancient pieces. Only when she was certain the artifacts were secure did Maya finally allow herself to process what had happened. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she felt the full weight of the day crash down on her. The humiliation of being escorted off the plane, the suspicion in the officer's eyes, the whispers and stares of other passengers. It all came rushing back. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her colleague, Lisa. "Maya, are you okay? There's a video going viral of a black woman being removed from a flight in Cairo. Please tell me that wasn't you." With trembling fingers, Maya opened her social media app. There it was, a shaky video taken from several rows back on the plane, showing her being approached by security and escorted off. The caption read, "Woman removed from our flight after acting suspicious about her luggage. What was she hiding?" The video already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, many of them jumping to wild conclusions about what might have been in her luggage. Maya closed the app, unable to read more. Tomorrow she would deal with this. Tomorrow she would speak with the university's public relations team about how to respond. Tomorrow she would figure out how to protect both her professional reputation and her dignity. But tonight, alone, in a hotel room far from home, all she could do was ensure the safety of the ancient treasures in her care. Artifacts that had survived thousands of years and would outlast this painful moment in her life, no matter how publicly it was playing out. The next morning dawned bright and clear over Cairo, but Maya barely noticed the perfect blue sky as she made her way back to the airport. She'd slept poorly, her dreams filled with watching eyes and pointed fingers. The viral video of her removal from the flight had continued to spread overnight, gaining thousands more views and generating a storm of comments ranging from curious to outright accusatory. Maya had spent an hour on the phone with Dr. Rivera and the university's public relations director before breakfast. They had agreed that the university would issue a brief statement explaining that Dr. Johnson had been transporting archaeological artifacts with full legal permission, but would not mention her by name to try to preserve some privacy. The PR director had strongly advised Maya to stay off social media and not engage with the story directly. "Let it blow over," he'd said. "These things have a short life cycle. Something else will go viral tomorrow." But as Maya checked in for her new flight, she couldn't shake the feeling that this incident would follow her. Already she noticed a few fellow travelers doing double takes as she passed, as if trying to place where they'd seen her before. The airline had upgraded her to business class as part of their apology, which meant she could board early and settle her precious cargo without the stress of crowded aisles. The special case containing the artifacts sat securely in the overhead bin, and Maya tried to relax into her seat, hoping for an uneventful journey. Just before the main boarding began, a flight attendant approached her seat. "Dr. Johnson?" she asked quietly, The captain would like to speak with you briefly. Maya's stomach tightened with anxiety. What now? But the captain, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, simply wanted to personally apologize for the previous day's incident. I've been briefed on. What happened? She said, standing in the galley area where they could speak privately. I want to assure you that our crew today is fully aware of your situation and the nature of your cargo. You won't experience any issues on this flight. Maya thanked her, touched by the gesture. As she returned to her seat, she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Perhaps this journey would go smoothly after all. The flight took off on time, and as the plane reached cruising altitude, Maya finally allowed herself to think beyond the immediate stress of travel. She opened her laptop and began reviewing her notes on the artifacts, losing herself in the familiar comfort of her work. The pottery fragments she carried were part of a larger collection discovered at a site believed to be an administrative center for agricultural production during Egypt's Middle Kingdom period. Initial examination had revealed inscriptions that might detail crop rotation techniques and irrigation methods, far more sophisticated than previously thought for that era. If her analysis confirmed these theories, it could significantly change historians' understanding of how ancient Egyptians managed to create such agricultural abundance in a desert environment. The implications extended beyond Egypt, potentially offering insights into sustainable farming practices relevant even today. As Maya worked, the businessman in the seat beside her glanced curiously at her screen. Sorry, I couldn't help noticing, he said. Are those ancient Egyptian artifacts? Maya hesitated, wary after yesterday's experience, but the man's interest seemed genuine. Yes, she said. I'm an archaeologist with Boston University. These pottery fragments may contain important information about ancient farming techniques. Fascinating, the man replied. I'm in agricultural technology myself. It's amazing how many modern solutions were actually known thousands of years ago. What followed was a pleasant conversation about the intersection of ancient knowledge and modern innovation. For the first time since the incident, Maya felt herself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of sharing her passion with someone who appreciated it. Several hours into the flight, Maya excused herself to use the lavatory. As she walked back to her seat, she overheard two flight attendants whispering near the galley. That's her, one said. The one from the video. I heard what was really in the luggage, the other replied. Ancient artifacts or something. Totally legitimate. Makes you wonder why they really pulled her off that flight then, doesn't it? Maya pretended not to hear as she passed, but their words stayed with her. The implication was clear, that perhaps the suspicious behavior reported by the previous flight crew had more to do with who she was than what she was carrying. Back in her seat, Maya tried to refocus on her work, but the conversation she'd overheard kept replaying in her mind. She'd encountered subtle biases throughout her academic career, the surprise on people's faces when she introduced herself as Dr. Johnson, the questions about whether she was really the lead researcher on projects, the occasional assumption that she was a graduate student rather than a professor. But yesterday's incident felt different, more public, more humiliating. Everything okay? Her seatmate asked, noticing her distraction. Just tired, Maya replied with a forced smile. Long couple of days. As the flight continued, Maya's phone occasionally buzzed with messages from colleagues who had seen the video. Most were supportive, expressing outrage on her behalf, but each notification served as a reminder that her private professional journey had somehow become public spectacle. By the time the plane began its descent into Boston, Maya was mentally exhausted but determined to put the incident behind her. What mattered now was getting the artifacts safely to the university lab and beginning the work she'd traveled to Egypt for in the first place. After landing, Maya was surprised to find Dr. Rivera waiting for her at the arrival gate. You didn't have to come meet me, she said as they embraced briefly. Of course I did, he replied, his usually jovial face serious. After what happened? Besides, I brought the department van so we can transport everything directly to the lab. As they walked through the terminal, Dr. Rivera filled her in on developments at the university. The statement we released has helped control the narrative somewhat, he explained. But I should warn you, there's been significant media interest. A few reporters have been calling the department. Maya sighed. I just want to focus on the research. And you will, Dr. Rivera assured her. We've set up everything in the imaging lab for you to start tomorrow. But first you need rest. The mention of the imaging lab brightened Maya's mood. For weeks, she'd been anticipating using the university's advanced technology to reveal the secrets hidden in the ancient pottery. The lab's multispectral imaging system could detect pigments and inscriptions invisible to the naked eye, while the 3D scanning equipment would create perfect digital replicas for analysis without risking damage to the originals. As they approached baggage claim, Maya noticed a small group of people holding cameras and microphones near the exit. Reporters, Dr. Rivera said grimly. Let's take the side exit. They changed direction, but not before one of the journalists spotted them. Dr. Johnson, can we get a statement about your experience in Cairo? Maya kept walking, following Dr. Rivera's lead toward a service corridor that would take them to a different exit. Behind them, she could hear footsteps and more questions being called out. Is it true you were profiled by airline staff? What were you transporting that caused such concern? How do you respond to accusations that the heavy door of the service corridor swung shut behind them, cutting off the questions? Maya leaned against the wall, her heart racing. I'm sorry. About that, Dr. Rivera said. The university's legal team advised us not to make any statements to the press beyond what was in our release. Maya nodded, too tired to argue. Part of her wanted to turn around and tell her story, to correct the wild speculations circulating online, to assert her dignity as a professional who had been wrongfully suspected and publicly humiliated. But another part just wanted to disappear into the quiet world of her research, where ancient pottery fragments spoke more truthfully than viral videos. They made their way to the parking garage without further incident. As they loaded Maya's luggage into the department van, Dr. Rivera's phone rang. It's the dean, he said, checking the screen. I should take this. While he spoke with the dean, Maya carefully secured her special case in the van, checking that it wouldn't shift during the drive to campus. After the ordeal of the past 2 days, she was more protective than ever of her precious cargo. When Dr. Rivera returned to the van, his expression was difficult to read. What did the dean want? Maya asked as they pulled out of the parking garage. The university's being pressured to make a more detailed statement, he explained. The airline issued an apology this morning, and it's generated even more interest in the story. People are asking questions about racial profiling in air travel. Maya looked out the window at the familiar Boston skyline coming into view. I just wanted to study ancient pottery, she said quietly. I never wanted to become a hashtag. Dr. Rivera glanced at her sympathetically. I know, but sometimes these things choose us, not the other way around. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, as they approached the university campus, Maya spoke again. What does the dean want me to do? Nothing you're not comfortable with, Dr. Rivera assured her. The university will support whatever decision you make, whether that's speaking out or focusing entirely on your research. The campus came into view, its brick buildings and tree-lined paths a welcome sight after the long journey. As they pulled up to the archaeology department's building, Maya made a decision. I need to see the artifacts safely to the lab, she said. That's my first priority. After that, I'll think about what to say. Inside the building, several of Maya's colleagues were waiting to welcome her and help transport the artifacts to the secure imaging lab. Their warm greetings and offers of assistance were a balm after the suspicion and scrutiny she'd faced during her travels. The imaging lab was Maya's favorite place on campus, a state-of-the-art facility where ancient objects revealed their secrets under specialized lighting and scanning equipment. As her colleagues carefully unloaded the pottery fragments and began setting up the initial imaging sequences, Maya felt a sense of rightness return. This was where she belonged, doing the work she loved. Dr. Patel, the lab director, gave her a quick tour of the new equipment that had been installed during her absence. We've upgraded the multispectral camera, she explained, showing Maya a sleek new device. It can now detect pigments at an even narrower wavelength range, which means we might see details that were previously invisible. For the first time, since the incident at the Cairo airport, Maya felt genuine excitement. Can we run a preliminary scan today, just to see what we're working with? Dr. Patel checked her watch. It's getting late and you must be exhausted. But we could do a quick test on one fragment if you'd like. Maya selected the largest pottery piece from her collection, a fragment about the size of her hand that appeared to contain part of a painted scene showing farmers working in fields. To the naked eye, much of the painting had faded to barely visible outlines, but Maya knew the multispectral imaging might reveal much more. As Dr. Patel prepared the equipment, Maya carefully positioned the fragment on the scanning platform. Each movement was deliberate, respectful of the artifact's age and fragility. "Ready when you are," Dr. Patel said, seated at the computer that controlled the imaging system. Maya stepped back and watched as the specialized camera began capturing images of the pottery fragment under different wavelengths of light. On the computer screen, a series of images appeared, each revealing different aspects of the ancient paint that had long since faded from view. "Look at that," Dr. Patel said, pointing to one of the images where previously invisible lines had emerged. "There's definitely more detail here than we could see before." Maya leaned closer, momentarily forgetting her exhaustion and the stress of the past 2 days. What she was seeing was exactly what she had hoped for: evidence of detailed agricultural scenes that could provide new insights into ancient farming techniques. "Can you enhance this section?" she asked, pointing to an area that appeared to show an irrigation system. Dr. Patel zoomed in on the area and adjusted the settings. The image sharpened, revealing a complex network of lines that might represent water channels. "This is remarkable," Maya whispered. "If I'm interpreting this correctly, they were using a form of controlled flooding that's much more sophisticated than we previously thought for this period." For the next hour, they examined the images from different angles and under different spectral conditions, each new view revealing more details about the ancient artifact. The excitement of discovery pushed away Maya's fatigue and distress. This was why she had become an archaeologist. For moments like this, when the past spoke directly across thousands of years. Eventually, Dr. Rivera returned to the lab to check on their progress. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked, smiling at Maya's obvious excitement. "More than interesting," she replied, gesturing to the screen. "Potentially groundbreaking. Look at this irrigation system. It's at least 500 years ahead of when we thought these techniques were developed." Dr. Rivera studied the images, his own expertise in ancient civilizations, allowing him to appreciate the significance of what they were seeing. "This is exactly why these artifacts needed to come here for analysis," he said. "No wonder you were so protective of them during transport." The casual reference to her protective behavior brought Maya back to reality with a jolt. That same, normal professional concern had been interpreted as suspicious by the flight crew, leading to her removal from the plane and the viral video that followed. Dr. Rivera noticed her change in expression. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up bad memories." Maya shook her head. "It's not your fault, I just can't help thinking about the contrast. Here, my expertise is respected and valued. On that plane, it made me suspicious. Which is exactly why this story has resonated with so many people," Dr. Rivera said gently. "It highlights a reality that many face but few can document so clearly." As they carefully packed away the pottery fragment for the night, securing it in the lab's climate-controlled storage unit, Maya considered Dr. Rivera's words. Perhaps there was value in sharing her experience, in adding her voice to a larger conversation about respect, dignity, and the assumptions people make based on appearance. "I think I'm ready to make a statement," she said as they prepared to leave the lab. "Not just about what happened to me, but about these artifacts and why they matter. About the work we do and why it deserves respect." Dr. Rivera nodded approvingly. "I think that's a wise approach, using this moment to educate rather than just express outrage." As they walked out of the building into the cool evening air, Maya felt a new sense of purpose emerging from the chaos of the past few days. The pottery fragments had survived for thousands of years, carrying their silent message across time. Now it was her responsibility not only to decipher that message, but to ensure that the messenger, herself, was heard and respected as well. "Tomorrow," she said, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Tomorrow, we'll let both the ancient and modern worlds speak." Maya woke to the sound of her phone buzzing persistently on the nightstand. Squinting at the screen, she saw a string of notifications, missed calls, text messages, emails, and social media alerts. The clock read 6:17 a.m. With a groan, she sat up in her bed, the events of the past few days rushing back into her consciousness. The flight, the humiliation, the viral video. It all felt both distant and painfully immediate. The most recent text was from Dr. Rivera. "Morning news shows are covering the story. Call me when you're up." Maya scrolled through her notifications, her stomach tightening. The university's statement had been picked up by major news outlets. The airline had issued a more detailed apology, acknowledging that their staff had acted on unfounded suspicions. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like "flying while black" and "what was in her luggage." She clicked on one news link and saw her own face staring back at her. A professional headshot from the university website placed alongside a still from the viral video showing her being escorted off the plane. The headline read, "Renowned archaeologist removed from flight while transporting ancient artifacts." The article itself was surprisingly balanced, explaining her credentials and the nature of her work, along with quotes from both the airline and the university. But the comments section beneath told a different story, a battlefield of opinions, with some reader outraged on her behalf and others suggesting there must have been more to the story than racial profiling. Maya put down her phone and headed for the shower, trying to clear her head. Under the warm water, she thought about what she wanted to say in her statement. This wasn't just about her personal humiliation anymore. It had become part of a larger conversation about assumptions, respect, and who gets the benefit of the doubt in public spaces. By the time she arrived at the university, dressed in a professional blazer and carrying a travel mug of strong coffee, Maya had made up her mind. She would speak about what happened, but she would do it on her own terms, focusing on the importance of her work and the need for understanding across cultural divides. Dr. Rivera met her at the entrance to the archaeology building, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. "You've become quite famous overnight," he said, walking beside her toward the department offices. "The dean's office has received requests for interviews from several national news programs." Maya took a sip of her coffee. "I want to do one statement, just one, and then get back to my work. Can we arrange something here in the lab with the artifacts? I want people to see what this was really about." Dr. Rivera nodded approvingly. "I think that's a perfect approach. The university's PR team can help set it up for this afternoon. If you're ready." "I'm ready," Maya said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "But first I want to spend the morning in the lab. Those pottery fragments have waited 4,000 years to tell their story. They shouldn't have to wait any longer because of this distraction." The imaging lab was quiet and cool when Maya entered, the specialized equipment humming softly in the background. Dr. Patel was already there, preparing the scanning platform for the day's work. "I saw the news," Dr. Patel said as Maya sat down, her bag. "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there," Maya replied, putting on her lab coat. "Let's focus on the work for now. I want to scan the fragment with the field workers today, the one that showed the irrigation system." For the next several hours, Maya lost herself in the familiar rhythms of careful archaeological analysis. Each pottery fragment was gently placed on the scanning platform, imaged under various wavelengths of light and digitally enhanced to reveal details invisible to the naked eye. The computer screen filled with images of ancient Egyptian farmers, irrigation channels, and hieroglyphic notations about crop yields and planting seasons. "Look at this," Maya said excitedly, pointing to a series of markings along the edge of one fragment. "These appear to be measurements, possibly for water levels or field dimensions." Dr. Patel zoomed in on the markings. "The precision is remarkable. They were clearly using a standardized system." "Exactly," Maya agreed. "And it corresponds with similar notations found at other sites from the same period. We're seeing evidence of a centralized agricultural administration with consistent practices across a wide geographical area. As they worked, Maya felt her perspective shifting. The humiliation of being escorted off that plane still stung, but it was being balanced by the joy of discovery, the thrill of connecting with human lives from thousands of years ago. These ancient farmers had faced their own challenges and found innovative solutions. Their story deserved to be told, regardless of the temporary drama surrounding the messenger. Around noon, Dr. Rivera returned to the lab with news that the PR team had arranged for a press statement at 2 p.m. They would set up in the university's main conference room, with a selection of the artifacts, those not currently being scanned, on display. Just a brief statement and perhaps a few questions, he explained. They're limiting the number of reporters to keep it manageable. Maya nodded, feeling surprisingly calm about the prospect. I'll be ready. As Dr. Rivera turned to leave, he paused. Oh, and Maya? The hashtag "what was in her luggage" is trending. Nationally, people are actually getting interested in archaeology because of this incident. Maya couldn't help but smile at the irony. Well, that's one positive outcome, I suppose. After lunch, Maya changed into the fresh clothes she'd brought. A simple but elegant dress that she usually reserved for conference presentations. She wanted to look professional but approachable for the cameras. Dr. Patel helped her select several pottery fragments to display during the press statement, pieces that were visually interesting and told part of the story of ancient Egyptian agriculture. Each one was carefully transported to the conference room in its protective case. The conference room was already filled with reporters and camera equipment when Maya arrived. A table had been set up at the front, with the pottery fragments arranged on special stands, properly lit to show their details without risking damage from harsh lights. The university's PR director, a polished woman named Valerie, briefed Maya quickly before they began. We've got representatives from major networks and newspapers, she explained. You'll give your statement, then we'll take about 5 questions. If anything makes you uncomfortable, just look at me and I'll step in. Maya nodded, scanning the room. There were perhaps 20 reporters present with cameras set up at the back. On a small monitor near the door, she could see that her image was being projected onto screens in an overflow room, where more press had gathered. The realization that so many people were interested in her story was startling. Just days ago, she had been focused solely on her research, excited but not expecting wide public attention. Now she was about to address a national audience. Valerie stepped up to the microphone first, introducing Maya with a brief summary of her credentials and the circumstances that had led to the press conference. Then it was Maya's turn. Taking a deep breath, she approached the podium, feeling the weight of all those eyes and cameras upon her. For a moment, it reminded her of the stairs on the airplane, but she pushed the thought aside. This time, she was in control of the narrative. Good afternoon, she began, her voice clear and steady. My name is Dr. Maya Johnson. I'm an associate professor of archaeology at Boston University, specializing in ancient Egyptian agricultural practices. She gestured to the artifacts displayed on the table beside her. These pottery fragments you see here are approximately 4,000 years old. They contain detailed inscriptions and images related to farming techniques developed during Egypt's Middle Kingdom period. They're on loan from the Egyptian government for specialized analysis in our imaging lab. Maya paused, looking directly into the main camera. 3 days ago, while transporting these artifacts from Cairo to Boston, I was removed from my flight because a crew member found my protective behavior toward my luggage suspicious. I was escorted off the plane by police, questioned, and had my luggage inspected despite having all the proper documentation for transporting these artifacts. The room was completely silent. Every reporter focused intently on her words. I'm not here today to assign blame or demand apologies, Maya continued. The airline has already acknowledged their mistake. What I want to focus on is something more important: the value of understanding across cultural and professional divides. She picked up one of the pottery fragments, holding it carefully for the cameras to see. These pieces may look like broken pottery to the untrained eye, But to archaeologists, they're precious windows into human history. They tell us how people thousands of years ago solved problems we still face today. How to grow food efficiently, how to manage water resources, how to organize communities around essential tasks. Maya set the fragment down gently and looked back at the audience. When the flight attendant saw me being protective of my unusual luggage, there was a missed opportunity for understanding. A simple question about what I was carrying might have led to a fascinating conversation about ancient history instead of a security incident. She straightened her shoulders, her voice growing more passionate. I believe most misunderstandings in our world stem from similar gaps. Times when we make assumptions instead of asking questions, when we react with suspicion instead of curiosity. This is true whether we're talking about archaeological artifacts or the people carrying them. The subtle reference to racial profiling wasn't lost on the reporters, many of whom were nodding or scribbling notes. My hope is that this incident serves as a reminder for all of us to approach unfamiliar situations with openness rather than fear. The ancient Egyptians developed sophisticated systems for sharing knowledge across their society. Perhaps we can learn from their example. Maya concluded by thanking the Egyptian government for their trust in loaning the artifacts, the university for their support, and even the airline for their acknowledgement of the mistake. Now, I'll take a few questions, she said. And then, I need to get back to the lab. Those ancient farmers have been waiting 4,000 years to share their knowledge. I don't want to keep them waiting any longer. A soft chuckle rippled through the room, breaking some of the tension. Hands shot up across the audience, and Valerie stepped forward to direct the question period. Washington Post, she said, pointing to a reporter in the front row. Dr. Johnson, do you believe you were targeted specifically because of your race? Maya had anticipated this question and had her answer ready. I can't speak to the conscious intentions of the flight crew, she said, carefully. What I know is that protective behavior over luggage is common among many. Travelers, musicians with instruments, photographers with cameras, parents with family heirlooms. The question we should all consider is why some people's protective behavior is seen as normal while others is viewed with suspicion. More hands went up. Valerie pointed to another reporter. New York Times. Can you tell us more about what these artifacts reveal about ancient Egyptian agriculture? Maya smiled, grateful for the chance to shift to her area of expertise. What's most exciting about these particular fragments is that they show evidence of a sophisticated irrigation system that predates our previous understanding by several centuries. The ancient Egyptians were practicing a form of controlled flooding that allowed them to extend growing seasons and increase crop yields in ways we hadn't realized were developed so early. For the next few questions, Maya deftly balanced addressing the incident with sharing insights about her research. When asked about the viral video, she acknowledged that public exposure had been difficult, but expressed hope that it might generate more interest in archaeology. If this incident means more people learn about ancient Egyptian farming techniques, then something positive will have come from it, she said with a small smile. The final question came from a reporter at the back of the room. Dr. Johnson, what would you like the flight crew who reported you to know? Maya paused, considering her answer carefully. I would want them to know that I understand their job includes looking for unusual behavior. But I would also want them to know that unusual doesn't always mean threatening. Sometimes it just means interesting, or passionate, or dedicated to preserving something valuable. I'd invite them to visit our lab, actually. I think they might find what we do here as fascinating as I do. With that, Valerie stepped in to end the press conference, thanking everyone for coming. As Maya carefully gathered the artifacts to return them to the lab, several reporters approached with additional questions, but Valerie deftly managed them, allowing Maya to exit with her precious cargo. In the hallway outside, Dr. Rivera was waiting with a broad smile. That was masterful, he said as they walked back toward the lab. Educational, dignified, and you made your point without creating more division. The dean is thrilled. Maya felt a wave of relief that it was over. I just hope people remember the archaeology part and not just the incident. Speaking of which, Dr. Rivera said, we've received 3 emails already from high schools asking if you'd be willing to do virtual presentations about Egyptian agriculture for their classes. Apparently, teachers see this as a great opportunity to get students interested in ancient history. Maya laughed, the sound surprising even herself. After days of stress and humiliation, the idea that something positive might emerge was a welcome relief. Back in the imaging lab, Dr. Patel was waiting with excitement. While you were doing the press conference, the computer finished processing. The enhanced scans of the irrigation fragment, she said. You're going to want to see this. On the large monitor, a series of images showed increasingly detailed views of the pottery fragment, with the final enhancement revealing a clear set of hieroglyphic instructions alongside the irrigation diagram. Is that? Maya began, leaning closer. Yes, Dr. Patel confirmed. It appears to be a manual of sorts, specific instructions for when to open and close different water channels based on the Nile's flooding stages. For the next hour, Maya forgot about press conferences, viral videos, and public scrutiny. She was lost once again in the ancient world, deciphering the wisdom of farmers who had lived and died thousands of years ago, but whose knowledge had survived, waiting patiently in clay fragments to be discovered and appreciated. As the afternoon light began to fade outside the lab windows, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rivera. Your press conference is trending now. Ask an Archaeologist is taking off. People are posting questions about ancient Egypt and archaeology. Maya smiled as she looked at the text, then at the ancient fragment under the scanner. Perhaps there was wisdom to be found not just in the artifacts, but in how we choose to respond when our journeys take unexpected turns. She typed a quick reply. Tell them I'll answer their questions tomorrow. Right now, I'm having a fascinating conversation with some ancient Egyptian farmers. 2 months had passed since Maya's airport ordeal, and autumn had transformed the university campus into a tapestry of gold and crimson. The maple trees outside the archaeology building blazed with color, their leaves occasionally drifting through open windows into the busy laboratories where Maya and her team worked. The pottery fragments from Egypt had yielded even more remarkable insights than initially hoped. Maya's analysis had confirmed that the ancient Egyptians had developed a sophisticated system of crop rotation and controlled irrigation nearly 5 centuries earlier than previously believed. The discovery had sent ripples of excitement through the archaeological community. Today, Maya was preparing for the opening of a special exhibition at the University Museum. Growing Through Time, Ancient Egyptian Agricultural Innovation. The WAM exhibition would feature the pottery fragments alongside interactive displays explaining their significance, and would be open to both academics and the general public. How does this look? Asked Layla, a graduate student who had been assisting with the exhibition setup. She adjusted a display panel showing a digital reconstruction of the irrigation system depicted on one of the fragments. Maya stepped back to consider the panel. It's perfect. I love how you've animated the water flow to show how the system would have worked in different seasons. Layla beamed at the praise. She was one of several students who had joined Maya's research team in the weeks following the media attention. The unexpected spotlight on Maya's work had brought a surge of interest from students fascinated by both archaeology and the woman who had turned a humiliating incident into an educational opportunity. Dr. Johnson, the museum curator, Daniel Wang, approached with a tablet in hand. We've had another 30 school groups register for tours of the exhibition. That brings us to over 100 schools in the first month alone. Maya shook her head in amazement. I never expected this level of interest. We might need to extend the exhibition beyond the initial 3 months. Already in the works, Daniel replied with a smile. The dean has approved funding for a 6-month run, with the possibility of making it a traveling exhibition afterward. As they spoke, Maya noticed Dr. Rivera entering the exhibition hall, accompanied by an elegantly dressed woman who surveyed the displays with obvious interest. Maya, Dr. Rivera called, waving her over. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Maya excused herself from Daniel and crossed the room to greet them. Dr. Maya Johnson, this is Nadia Karim, the cultural attaché from the Egyptian embassy. Dr. Rivera introduced them. Dr. Johnson, it's an honor to meet you, Nadia said, extending her hand. Your work has caused quite a stir. not just in archaeological circles but in Egypt as well. Maya shook her hand warmly. The honor is mine. I'm grateful to the Egyptian government for entrusting these artifacts to our care. That's partly why I'm here, Nadia explained. The Minister of Antiquities has been following your research with great interest. The discoveries you've made about our ancient agricultural practices have significance not just historically but potentially for modern sustainable farming in Egypt. She paused, gesturing to the displays around them. This exhibition is impressive. The minister would like to discuss the possibility of creating a similar installation at the Cairo Museum, with you as a guest curator. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. I would be honored to contribute to such a project. Excellent, Nadia smiled. There's also the matter of the documentary. Documentary. Maya looked to Dr. Rivera, who was grinning broadly. National Geographic has proposed a documentary about your discoveries, he explained. They're particularly interested in the connection between ancient Egyptian farming techniques and modern sustainable agriculture. Nadia has been helping coordinate permission for filming at sites in Egypt. Maya took a moment to absorb this news. When she'd first arrived at the Cairo airport 2 months ago, luggage in hand, her only concern had been transporting the pottery fragments safely for academic study. Never could she have imagined that her research would reach such a wide audience, or attract this level of interest. It seems your archaeological work has taken on a life of its own, Nadia observed. Though I must admit, the initial attention came from an unfortunate circumstance. Maya nodded, acknowledging the reference to the airport incident. In the weeks following her press conference, the story had evolved from a viral video about alleged profiling to discussions about archaeology, cultural heritage, and the importance of cross-cultural understanding. The hashtag #AskAnArchaeologist had taken off on social media, with thousands of people posting questions about ancient civilizations. Maya had participated in several online Q&A sessions, answering questions about everything from pyramid construction to daily life in ancient Egypt. Schools had reached out requesting virtual presentations, and Maya had spoken to classrooms across the country about archaeology and ancient agricultural practices. Many teachers reported that students who had never shown interest in history before were suddenly fascinated by the practical innovations of ancient civilizations. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys don't follow the path we expect, Maya said thoughtfully. I came to Egypt looking for information about ancient farming and ended up sparking conversations about much more. As they continued their tour of the exhibition, Maya pointed out features of the displays, explaining how her team had worked to make complex archaeological concepts accessible to a general audience. We've created these interactive stations where visitors can try their hand at deciphering hieroglyphics related to agriculture, she explained, demonstrating a touch-screen display. And over here we have a scale model of a Middle Kingdom farm, with the irrigation system we discovered. Nadia studied the model with interest. The similarity to some traditional farming methods still used in parts of rural Egypt is remarkable. That's one of the most exciting aspects of this research, Maya agreed. These aren't just historical curiosities. They're practical innovations that survived for thousands of years because they worked. Some of these techniques could be relevant for sustainable farming today, especially in regions facing water scarcity. As they reached the final section of the exhibition, Maya stopped before a simple display case. Inside lay the pottery fragment that had started it all, the piece with the detailed irrigation diagram that had been in her special luggage on that fateful flight. This is the keystone of our discovery, she explained. The inscription describes a system of controlled flooding using canals with adjustable barriers that could be opened or closed, depending on the season and the stage of the Nile's annual flood. Nadia leaned closer to examine the fragment. And this traveled with you on the plane? The piece that caused all the trouble? Maya nodded. It doesn't look like much to the untrained eye, just a broken piece of pottery with faded markings. But within it is the story of how an ancient civilization thrived in one of the world's most challenging environments. A valuable reminder not to judge by appearances, Nadia observed. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a museum assistant. Dr. Johnson, the film crew is here for the preliminary interview, They're setting up in the lecture hall. Maya checked her watch. I should go. Nadia, would you like to join us? Your perspective on the cultural significance of these artifacts would be valuable. I'd be delighted, Nadia replied. As they made their way to the lecture hall, they passed a group of visitors gathered around a large screen displaying news coverage of Maya's original press conference. The museum had included a section about how the archaeological discovery had captured public attention, placing it in the context of other famous archaeological finds that had captured the popular imagination. The lecture hall was bustling with activity when they arrived. A professional film crew was setting up lights and cameras while a producer gave instructions to various crew members. Near the center of the room stood a woman Maya recognized as Alexandra Torres, a well-known documentary host for National Geographic. Dr. Johnson, Alexandra greeted her warmly. Thank you for making time for us today. We're excited to begin work on this project. The pleasure is mine, Maya replied. And please, call me Maya. As introductions were made and preliminary discussions began about the documentary's scope and approach, Maya found herself reflecting on the journey of the past 2 months. The viral video of her removal from the flight had eventually faded from headlines, but not before sparking important conversations about bias and assumptions. The airline had implemented new training programs for their staff about cultural sensitivity and recognizing the difference between suspicious behavior and professional caution. More significantly, Maya had received hundreds of messages from other academics, especially women of color, sharing similar experiences and expressing gratitude that her story had brought attention to challenges they often faced silently. But perhaps most meaningful to Maya was how the incident had unexpectedly amplified her life's work. People who might never have given a thought to ancient Egyptian farming practices were now engaging with archaeological discoveries, asking questions about how past civilizations solved problems still relevant today. The documentary planning session lasted over an hour, with Alexandra and her team outlining an ambitious project that would trace the development of agricultural techniques from ancient Egypt to the present day, highlighting the ingenuity of early innovations and their potential applications for modern sustainable farming. We'd like to film you working in your lab here, Alexandra explained, and then travel with you to Egypt to visit the original excavation site and other locations where similar farming techniques were used. We've already secured preliminary permissions for filming at several archaeological sites, Nadia added. The ministry is very supportive of this project. As the meeting concluded and people began to disperse, Dr. Rivera approached Maya with news of yet another development. The dean just called, he said quietly. The university is establishing a new center for sustainable archaeological practices, with a focus on how ancient innovations can address modern challenges. They want you to direct it. Maya was momentarily speechless. That's a tremendous opportunity. You've earned it, Dr. Rivera said simply. Your work has always been exceptional, but the way you've handled everything these past months, turning a negative experience into an educational moment, bringing archaeology to a wider audience, it's been inspiring to watch. Later that evening, after the film crew had departed and the final preparations for tomorrow's exhibition opening were complete, Maya found herself alone in the museum gallery. She walked slowly among the displays, taking in the culmination of months of work by her team. The pottery fragments, so carefully transported from Egypt, now took center stage in an exhibition that would be seen by thousands of visitors. Their stories, the stories of ancient farmers who had developed ingenious solutions to environmental challenges, would reach audiences far beyond the academic world. Maya stopped before a large photograph that formed part of the exhibition's introduction. It showed her working in the field in Egypt, carefully excavating artifacts under the desert sun. Beside it was a quote from her press conference. These pieces may look like broken pottery to the untrained eye, but to archaeologists, they're precious windows into human history. They tell us how people thousands of years ago solved problems we still face today. As she read her own words, Maya thought about the unexpected path that had led her here. The humiliation of being escorted off that plane had been painful, but it had set in motion a chain of events that had amplified her voice and her work in ways she could never have anticipated. Tomorrow, the exhibition would open to the public. School groups would file through, university students would study the displays, and visitors of all ages would learn about the ingenuity of ancient Egyptian farmers. Some would come because they had heard about the archaeology. Others might come because they had heard about Maya's story, but all would leave having learned something new about human history and innovation. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her department head. Just heard from the president of Egypt's Agricultural University. They want to collaborate on implementing some of the ancient techniques you've documented in modern farming projects. This is getting bigger by the day. Maya smiled as she read the message. The ancient pottery fragments had survived for thousands of years, preserving knowledge that had once seemed lost to time. Now, that knowledge was finding new life and new purpose. As she turned to leave the quiet gallery, Maya paused for one last look at the exhibition. What had begun as a simple research project and then been complicated by an unfortunate incident of bias had transformed into something far more significant. A bridge between past and present, a conversation across cultures and time periods, and perhaps even a source of solutions for contemporary challenges. The pottery fragments had traveled a difficult journey from Egypt to Boston, but they had arrived exactly where they needed to be. And so Maya realized with a sense of quiet satisfaction, had she? Tomorrow, when the doors opened and visitors streamed in, a new chapter would begin, not just for Maya's career, but for the ancient knowledge she had helped to uncover. The ancient Egyptian farmers who had carefully recorded their agricultural innovations on pottery fragments 4,000 years ago could never have imagined that their work would one day inspire modern, sustainable farming practices. But that connection across millennia was exactly why archaeology mattered. As Maya switched off the gallery lights and headed home to prepare for tomorrow's opening, she felt a deep sense of purpose and connection. To the past she studied, to the future she hoped to influence, and to the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. Sometimes, she reflected, the most valuable discoveries happen when we're forced off our planned route. Sometimes what looks like an obstacle turns out to be a doorway to something greater than we had imagined. And sometimes, the most important story isn't the one we set out to tell, but the one that finds us along the way.